Well, welcome everyone to another episode of the Powerlunch. This one is one I've been looking forward to. We actually are joined by Ray Stasieczko. Did I get that right, Ray?
You got it pretty close. I think you're okay.
All right, we'll go with good enough. It's hard for a guy from northern Wisconsin to pronounce anything right, so We'll give her an A for effort. We have Ray joining us from the world famous and possibly galactic fame End of the Day with Ray podcast. It's a podcast that I watch. I track Ray, keep up on the stuff he's talking about. But Ray has a very interesting and engaging podcast. He talks a lot about things that are going on in the industry, in the MSP industry, in IT space, and in imaging and copy and those types of things. The show today is going to be very interesting and probably different in that we'll be talking about print and how to save on your print, and maybe we'll go into some other things about how the industry is changing, because I would put Ray in the category of being a soothsayer in the space of what's happening in that technology. So without any further delay, well, I guess I will also mention, as usual, we have the chat feature. So if you have questions and you want to ask them, go ahead and pop it in the chat. Ray, don't worry about having to look at those. I can look at those and we'll ask you those questions as we go through. I think the other piece of it is we're fairly informal. You probably picked up on that already. We're fairly informal and want it to be conversational. So if people have questions, feel free to ask them and we'll go from there. And we just want to have a fun session where we're sharing information and learning from Ray today. So without further ado, I think I'll turn it over to Ray, and maybe you can start telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then go into a little bit on the print stuff.
Okay, well, hey, I appreciate that, Keith. I'm not sure about galactic or not, but we
intergalactic.
The end of the day with Ray kind of took a life of its own, so I'm excited about that. We gathered a pretty good following, but if you look in the market today, there's a lot of industry analysts, if you will, but most of the time the analysts try to look at what we're doing exactly right now and then try to project what exactly the right now looks like in the future. I try to look at what we're doing right now exactly and try to figure out how it doesn't work in the future. Right. And so I think that's a little bit of the difference. But the print industry obviously has changed drastically over the 30 years of my tenure. I started as a sales rep with Lanier Worldwide, Tampa market, carrying a copier on a cart that you put in the van and take it out and demo it and sell it to people. Interesting. You had customers that didn't even know what a copy machine was, or they had no use for one, and we tried to sell it to them. That was exciting days. From there, I went on to own a dealership, sold a dealership, worked as a consultant with a print dealer as he was transitioning from print to IT services. And it was really through that transition that the light bulb went off, where you saw the value in delivering IT services as opposed to the value of print, or what the end users really pay for print in comparison to a total technology spend. And a lot of times the print industry, or they'll come up with these crazy, ridiculous surveys. I don't know who does them, but they'll say that a customer spends 90% of their revenue on print or whatever it is. That's exaggeration, but in all reality, print represents probably about 1.2 to 1.5% of a customer's technology spend. So if you look what a customer spends on all their technology, their ISPs and their softwares and their licenses and their computers, all the technology they spend, and then you take the printer in the hallway that's running, 4,000 or 5,000 pages a month at a penny and a half, and the lease on it, it's like 1 or 2%, never more than 2% of the revenue. And so, we ran around as an industry trying to save people money on print. Was a big mantra with managed print services, and most of that was built really so we could control the consumable. If we could get them to sign a contract and we'd manage their printer for them, then we could give them the toner included and we wouldn't have to worry about them buying a toner from somebody else. But in all reality, the customer's pain point today, especially post-pandemic, is not about their printer. It really isn't. If you think about the awareness that they finally have for the first time in their life, how they can move documents around behind glass and keep them there. Most of their services now are coming from the cloud, which is having an impact on MSPs themselves and some of the hardware they used to sell. So we're seeing this dynamic shift of, it amazes me. I still hear people arguing about how many people are versus how many people are going to work, in the office, and they're trying to use that number to formulate how much equipment we're going to sell to offices, whether that's print or whether that's IT, products and services themselves. But that's just not the argument. The argument to me is whether your company has 1% of the people working at home or 20% of the people working at home, your business processes are going to allow your employees to work remote. And if your business processes allow your employees to work remote, you think about all the things that go away. And obviously, big giant printers with sorters in the hallways, one of the things that's probably going to go away pretty quick. And so, it'll be interesting to see how the dynamics in the marketplace change, or how the MSP providers like yourselves, when you're in the marketplace and you start looking at the printers, I mean, the conversations really is to the customer, might not necessarily be killing you from a budget standpoint, your print equipment, but is it a dysfunctional process that you have to go through to acquire it? Is there a better way to do it? Could we shift some of those dollars, even though they're probably not at the top of your mind to try to save money on print, but can we shift some of those dollars to help you more in some cloud services or security services, things that the organization really needs to do to be more future-proof? And I think as more of the MSPs around the world talk about that with customers, the print channel will definitely have some threats, because you guys can, if you understand what's going on with print and you can educate the customer on a better way, you're going to be in the power seat. And if you're doing it from a standpoint of truly trying to help the customer, not trying to help out a manufacturer that you sell their print equipment, you're already starting out in a customer-centric mindset over the people that are trying to just push products to customers.
So when you start thinking about document print and that space, do you see any kind of is there a value add, or is there a shift happening because paper exists, paper is going to be in your office space, all those types of things, but a shift to maybe imaging is a way to think about it versus print. And when I say imaging, are we thinking about an interface that allows a business to attach, let's say, metadata to, so almost the print services are those devices that were output devices in the past, almost become input devices as organizations move away from paper, but they have paper they need to digitize. And not only do they need an image of that paper, but they need that paper, that document to be indexable. So I can do intelligent search on it. Is there any kind of a thrust in that direction?
Well, I think the channel is hoping it is, but I think that day ended in the year 2000 and 2010. I mean, if you think about it, what's not born behind glass? What business document is not born behind glass? Those, you're talking about very little verticals, maybe. Mm-hmm. Medical still has some, handwritten documents, but even today, when you're in the hospital, it's all behind glass. They're not even using charts anymore in a lot of these hospitals. So, what business, if you think about an industry that sells up and down the street print equipment that has the capability to scan in these small businesses, which is 85-90% of their customers, who the hell's scanning documents? I mean, this is, years ago, you had filing cabinets. You wanted to put all that stuff into the system because you were building an imaging system or a depository. You wanted to funnel all that in there so you could index it and pull it up whenever you wanted. Well, today it's already there. I mean, it's been in there for 5 or 6 or 7 years. So we're seeing, what can we do with some workflows? What kind of depository systems can we buy? But I think it's really not about the scanning as much as the people that want you to scan believe it is. I mean, I think there's still some verticals where you have to scan some document in, but I think that's distracting. I think that distracts a whole channel that's trying to sell, where the IT channel might be able to prevail a little better in this. If you're going into an environment and you want to help someone manage their documents that are already behind glass a better way, there's products out there you can do that with. But if your whole goal is to go in there to try to manage somebody's documents, which live behind glass, is to sell them a device to scan stuff into the glass, it's just stupid.
Right,
I mean,
right.
hey, keep the machine you have. Let's just pay off the lease. It's got a scanner on it. We'll make sure that when you do have to scan these originals, we can send them up to the, but they don't think that way. It's always, they're trying to, how do we bring more value to an MFP with a scanner by talking about document management? It's a nutty conversation because it's around
go
selling a
ahead.
product, not a solution.
If you're a person who is involved with the process of procuring those types of services, print services, those types of things, I mean, should you be negotiating the terms of contracts in a different way? Should you be thinking about that spend or that relationship in a different way? Because like I said, classically it was you sign online, you get your device, you're going to buy a toner and whatever from that organization, and it's kind of this process that exists, has existed. You cut the end off the rope because your mom cut the end off the roast and her grandma cut the end off the roast. Mm-hmm. But now it's different, like you said. I mean, should we be thinking about asking different questions and approaching these relationships in a different way when we're thinking about those human interface to paper devices?
Well, absolutely. The bottom line is, if you're a progressive dealer inside the imaging space, so you're a copier dealer that's maybe moved into some IT, and let's be honest, there's a very few in between that do this well. And so, but if they are selling IT services, and they can go into these accounts and they can base the solution upon the digital capabilities of let's just take a school district as a great example. We could sell a school district, $300,000, $400,000 worth of print equipment. If I'm a sales rep, I walk into a school district and I know I can sell them $200,000 or $300,000 worth of equipment. It's going to be fairly easy. I just have to win the bid. So I run back to my office and I negotiate all the services down to ridiculous pricing, so I can keep the money in the hardware, put them in a 5-year lease, and make my money and run. Well, that same sales rep, our industry wants to go into the school district and then bring in some IT folks to try to build this case about how we should sell them some backup services or security services, or we're going to sell them some, devices, some compute devices. But that's more complicated. It takes a longer process. So why don't we just sell them the print? And this has been the problem for, I just talked to a senior leader in the industry a couple of days ago on the end of the day with Ray. And, this has been a problem for that industry for a long time. And the ones that went out and bought IT companies to try to help them do that, hey, let's buy this IT company. Well, they ended up really they turned the IT company into a copier company. Should have been the other way around. The IT folks could easily understand print to a degree of what a customer needs. The only thing the IT community is missing in general is the idiosyncrasies around the equipment itself. And, once they understand that, or they understand how that equipment's being sold and leased to these customers, and they understand the bad processes with that, and they could help educate those customers on a better way, then they're going to come out much more customer centric. The dealerships that get into IT services and aren't worried about ringing the bell because it's closed out Friday and we're going to sell a machine today and I can get this customer to buy the copier, but it's going to take me a longer time to try to sell them IT services. So let's just slam the copier and hope it all works out. And so, I think hopefully those days are ending. Hopefully the pandemic has slapped that channel in the face to say, look, if you're going to do IT, you need to start out with a conversation about an assessment, look at the whole, the whole entire technology ecosystem of the company, and then, figure out what you can inject into that infrastructure to make some money, instead of just trying to sell a product so you can make some quick dollars.
Right. So, if you think about George Orwell and the prediction that we would have flying cars and all those things in the future, do you think that the prediction that we would have a paperless office place, is that something that's reasonable, or do you think that print will always have a little corner someplace, kind of like if I had invested in horse carriages a long time ago, I probably wouldn't do so well. But do you see that, is print ever going to disappear? Will there always be some kind of print, do you think?
That's really a great question. And I've always argued it's not about a paperless office. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the document imaging channel, or all these print companies, or all these people that sell these devices, the threat was never about a paperless office. But a lot of the industry wanted to make it that way because that's so ridiculous to comprehend. So if you have people out there promoting, we're never going to print on paper, it's a paperless office, well, you just sound like an idiot. Who the hell's going to take you serious? Because you can't comprehend not using paper. The argument is we're going to use so much less paper that the old engine that allowed us to make a lot of money by selling people clicks and output, you buy the machine, you pay us for all the service and all the toner and print as much as you can and hope you print a lot. Well, when you print a whole lot less and by a whole lot less, that number could be 80% less of what we were printing in the year 1990. And 80% less in print from the year 1990 in the year 2025 or 30 could be a reality. So if we're only printing 20% of what we used to print, that's going to change a whole lot of crap. That means we can buy our machines that we need for the occasional prints that we do need from Amazon. That means that we don't have to buy a big giant machine and have a whole team of people come in and set it up. I can order one that's click buy now, have it come in a box, pull it out, plug it in and run my pages.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's interesting because even even my own space as being a technology person, I've tried time and time again to be paperless, but I still have paper wherever I go. So what you're saying really makes sense to me. The fact that it's not going to be paperless, it'll be less paper, but not paper less. If that makes sense. But
you have to think about it as business processes. This is why this whole nonsense about people working at home, I call it the work from home bubble. The whole entire world went insane. People went home, all private equity groups, we got to invest in all this work from home and remote work. Well, all those remote work companies were already doing things. Zoom was already a great company. The pandemic just gave them a big boost to customers, but we got so excited about something that was already happening. We were already putting people at home to work. We should have been talking about this with our customers, 5 or 6 years ago. I wrote an article I published on LinkedIn back in 2017, and I said, let's not have Amazon have all the fun. What are we going to do about the workers that are going to go home? Because that trend had already started. I mean, we were moving quite a bit of people into remote workforces. And so, we put all this emphasis on this worker from home and how are we going to sell them equipment in their house and all this crazy crap. And it's stupid. It distracted us from looking at these businesses, and we got to figure out what are we going to be doing in these businesses, and how does that remote worker, how are we going to impact what we do with a remote worker?
Right.
But the world's not going to shut down every single business in the world. We are going to be less office space, which is going to have a big impact in a lot of ways.
Right. It's going to be a different office space. It's going to be hoteling and flexibility, and I might not work from home 100% of the time, but I might work from home 2 days a week. I might work from home 3 days a week, or I might work from a coffee shop someplace. You know what I mean? Because I agree that the concept of geography mattering goes away, right? Geography doesn't matter at that point. And I agree. It's not going to be like everybody's at home and they never see people, because I think one of the other things we saw during the pandemic is humans want to see each other. And we get a little stir crazy when we can't.
Well, I think we'll be more disciplined how we see each other. But the other thing is, maybe we'll have better venues to see each other. So, especially in the next couple of years, the pent-up demand for people to go hug each other is pretty big. So I think as we start seeing some of these conventions come back to life, they'll probably be bigger, better. They won't look like they did. It still amazes me if you think about all the technology we have. That y'all been to these conventions, you were there before the pandemic, but we're still doing a convention like we did in 1950. We got some table with a tablecloth around. Hell, you could go to a convention in Vegas that was held at the Golden Nugget in 1970. The only thing that's different about that convention is that the venue all around it is amazing, but we're still on the table with the tablecloth on it, with with the other curtains behind us. Yeah. And is that really the future of how we're going to display our goods? Is that really the future of how we're all going to get together? What kind of augmented realities are going to be involved? And we have so much high tech. So I think that whole meeting concept will change drastically over the next couple of years.
So, so I'm an old telephone guy, came from call centers, and one of the things that happened in that space was CTI, computer telephony integration, and voice over IP, right? Voice is data, blah, 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 that stuff. That happened 25 years ago. It started occurring there in the marketplace. And surprisingly, not a lot has changed since that that earth-shattering event, right? Other things have been wrapped around it, but there hasn't been kind of this crazy, earthquake of change happening in that space. Do you see anything? What do you see coming from a print or from a that perspective that might be groundbreaking? Yeah, are there any kind of new things coming down the road that might help push that? I don't want to say move away from print, but the migration to a different interface or maybe a smaller interface. Do you see anything coming down the road that is industry-changing technology?
I think this. I think our mobile devices will change drastically, and I think how we use the mobile devices. But this 70-inch board that I'm looking at you on, one day that will be my wall in my office or my conference room will be all glass that's interactive. We're going into a hotel right now, and we wake up in the morning and in our mirror, we're watching the news. So, a glass to me is going to play such a huge role in the future, and augmented reality. And the two go hand in hand. And if you ever follow Xerox or not, I've talked a little bit about these folks on the end of the day with Ray, but they bought a company called Cairo, which is a augmented reality company to help service people, service equipment they might not have ever seen, but they can pull it up on a device and be walked through it. And if you think about the applications for that, they're off the chart. I mean, and if you think about like in the print industry, if you think about it in the years ago, trying to fix 1,000 different models could kind of be problematic for a technician. You send them out to an account, they're looking at something that they never saw before. Well, now they can take their phone out within a few seconds and they can pull the machine up. It shows them how to open it up, what to look for. The most problems are, so the interactive ability with servicing through augmented reality will change. I think that could change service drastically. Drastically. You'll have more of your skill sets developing the software, and the people that are actually doing the service will probably have less skill sets. They'll just be really good at following directions. And so
it'll be like getting knee surgery from somebody in a remote location, right? That they're doing it now.
They are doing it. These are the things that are so silly, because we'll hear the print channel argue about this. Trust me, as I start talking, I'm going to talk more about this on the end of the day with Ray. But the arguments are going to be, oh, well, they'll never give the service like Billy. He's been doing it for 35 years, or blah, blah, blah. So they make it about, we can't fix a damn printer with someone using augmented reality, but we can do surgery on somebody's heart in another city when the surgery. So it's like, yeah, well, you're never gonna volunteer for that operation,
right?
But if you think about it, there's a company called I think the name is Taxi Stereo Taxis, or something. I said it right, but it's basically a robotic surgery company. They're actually out of St. Louis. And they have a capability to do surgery remotely, where you could have, and if you think about some of the areas of the world, let alone the United States, but where we have really rural areas where they can't afford to have a heart surgeon, but they might have a really qualified surgeon that could be working with a heart surgeon that's in St. Louis as an example, and we're doing it all through some kind of augmented reality. So, augmented reality will change a lot of things. 5G will change a lot of things. Paper in business processes will rapidly be eliminated. This is going to be rapidly eliminated to a point, like I said, where we don't need to have big, expensive equipment. And even if our equipment's down, it's not going to end our business. We're not going to be screaming and banging on the wall and calling up the guy down the street and saying, oh my God, I ran out of toner, because we're just going to figure out a different way to move the information.
So in that space, when you're thinking about, one of the things that I've seen in the IT space is the commoditization of IT field, because like ones and zeros move through the wires the same way, right? Nobody cares. It's table stakes. And there's certain things that are differentiators. What things do you see as a differentiator in the print space? So if you're a classic, if you have a vendor who's providing you with your print services now, what will make them special in the future versus vendor X, vendor Y, vendor Z? Why will somebody be picking one vendor over another one in the future?
If the vendor focuses on the information that the customer is trying to consume and shows them the best way to consume it, they'll win. If the provider is trying to figure out how to sell a product, they'll lose. And so we're going to move from a product-centric deliverable big time. For most of the industry, MSPs are in the same boat. Actually, the MSP world, I believe, has a lot of threats. I'll share some of those in a minute. But we built a business to sell products in the print side. We sold the products, and then we sold a service agreement for those products. But we sold the products came first. We always chased revenue. And now we are a commodity, whether they want to admit it or not. It's insane to hear people argue how print's not a commodity. I mean, the definition of a commodity is I can get the same thing from multiple people at an aggressive price.
Right.
That defines a commodity. Well, you can't say that with 15 OEMs in a declining marketplace, fighting for customers, giving away shit every single day, that's not a commodity. It's a commodity.
Yep.
This is one of my criticisms of HP. HP runs around the whole damn world talking about how they're a $56 billion company, how they're the greatest people in the world, and they got, they have a $35 billion compute company, their business process company, the compute side, that runs on about a 5% operating margin. Their money's in their print business. Well, I just described how the print business is going to get pressured like never before, and they're not going to be able to maintain those margins. And selling subscriptions for $1.99, I mean, none of that's going to help them when the biggest part of their business is absolutely a commodity. And when folks like Lenovo and Dell and whoever else wants to come, and don't give up on Apple. And so as these folks start pushing to give the equipment to the end users to consume their information behind glass, HP's just one of many in a commodity market. And their added value to the end user, what is it? I mean, really, what is it? Right. So when you look at MSPs around the country, their whole persona is to go into the customer and provide that level of support and services that they couldn't get through a commodity placement. The problem is that those $2,000 or $3,000 a month service contracts that a lot of these folks lived off of are going to be reduced to $700, $800, because you're going to have people like AT&T who bought Alien Vault. All of a sudden they're in there delivering security services. They already have mass customer bases through ISPs and telephony. And so Salesforce going out and buying our RMM company. I mean, they're a big threat to the MSP community. And so how does the MSP community differentiate themselves? They have to move upscale. They have to go to those accounts that are, compliant needy, that they need someone to help them make sure that they're not going to violate any of those compliance. And, customers that'll pay you $10,000 or $15,000 a month for services. And so there's a shift everywhere. You got to get out of the commodity space. If you're a copier company and you think you're going to sell these small A4 machines like you sold a big A3, you're going to go broke. You can't afford to do that. You can't pay a sales rep to run around and sell a product that the end user can buy for $1,000,
right?
Or $1,500. When back 10 years ago or 5 years ago, they were selling the same machine for $15,000. So we have a big shift. The commodity question is a big question. First thing we have to do, it's almost like an alcoholic. We got to admit that some of the stuff we do is a commodity,
right?
And not run from it. And then now that we know it's a commodity, how do we fight the other competitors to give a differentiator?
How do you find a differentiator in that space? And I laugh about that. Back when we were buying a consumer grade printer for your house. It was cheaper to buy a new printer than it was to get colored ink. I literally, you'd go out and, well, why am I spending this much on ink and toner when I could just get a whole new device?
Well, and that mentality is going to even grow more rapidly as I can get the devices even cheaper, and they're not that important to me. Right. I mean, let's be honest. If you can't print something in your home office, you're not going to go screaming and stomping up and down the stairs and, going crazy. You're just going to deal with it another way. And then eventually you'll just get a damn printer or you'll go on Amazon, whatever you got to do to get the supply you might need. So, trying to sell you got the whole industry out there. It's some of the OEMs too, trying to sell home users contracts on their printers, which is just insane to me. I mean, how many pages does someone print in their house? I always told the industry, if they just looked at their own business and their own employees, and then what they don't do for them, why in the world are they going to do it for somebody else? Yeah. I mean, I'd love to ask Konica or HP or any of these OEMs that are talking about all this crap they're going to do in people's houses. Well, how much of that are you paying for your people? How many subscription print programs did HP buy for their hundreds of thousands of employees? during COVID? Zero,
Right.
I would imagine.
Right.
But yet everybody in the world has to have this program. Maybe that's where they got the 10 million subscriptions. They sold everybody that works for them, and
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting point about, it's kind of back to eating their own dog food, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, your differentiator in all reality, I believe today for an SMB doing business with an SMB, the differentiator is the persona of your customer. And you're going to focus on what makes you the most money, where you can bring the most value and get the most revenue and profit from it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to get away from trying to figure out, because there's too much competition at the low end. There's too much competition for B2B resellers to be chasing customers that don't want to pay enough. They just need to go away unless you built a model specifically for that customer. Mm-hmm. And you could scale it and do it profitably. But a lot of people, what they do is they chase the revenue all the time, and they don't necessarily get the right customer. And if you can clearly define, who are we going to target market? Even the print sector. You could have a print company out there in the marketplace that only sells production print. That's all they do. Well, production print's a small percentage of the marketplace. So they couldn't just sell production print with an engine built to sell all these A3s to all the businesses. They'd have to change their model. But if they changed their business model and they went after those customers that would pay them for that value because production was important to them, they could probably actually make money at it. But instead, we added production print, all the other things that we do, and we dragged it down to the commodity level of all the other things we do. And so, and that's, if you think about the print industry, they have customers that'll put a printer on their desk that runs 100 pages a month. And that customer will have the same exact contract as a guy that bought a production print piece of equipment that runs 1 million pages a month. It's the same lease, same service contract, same dispatch system, same toner delivery system, and ironically and sadly, the same technician some of the times. So how is that even scalable?
Right.
So, and as more and more of your customers start running less and less print, then these other things you do that have this added value where you're really not making any money, but maybe you use those services as a lost leader to get the whole bunch of middle money. When the middle money goes away, you kind of get in trouble.
Sure.
And I call it the Hertz mentality. If you think about Hertz Car and why they went bankrupt, because of the rideshare community took away their sweet spot. They still rent cars. When you wreck your car and your insurance company says, hey, go get a rent-a-car. They still rent cars to mom and dad want to take the kids to grandma's for Thanksgiving in an SUV. But they lost all of the business travelers, or a big giant majority of them. And when they lost all the middle, they couldn't live off the fringes.
Right.
And you're going to see our channel do the same thing. They built some IT businesses that represent less than 5 or 6% of their total revenue. Those IT businesses are dysfunctional as hell. And I know, Paul, you've probably seen some of these folks and how they attempt to go in with IT. And so when you lose all this revenue because we don't go paperless, but we just reduce it so much we can't make as much money on it, how the hell are we going to support a dysfunctional IT business? Right. Or how are we going to support the production print on the other end of it? So, there's a lot of things to think about, but the first thing to think about, whether you're an MSP or a print company, is who am I really going to sell, and who's going to give me the best bang for my buck to help me go to the future, help that customer go to the future.
Right.
And it's not everybody. If you say everybody, then you're going to be in trouble, because the people that can go after everybody have a lot more money than you. and they're going to do it in a ways that you could never do.
Right.
And the threats are big threats. Amazon's a big threat. They're a threat to distributors. I talked to, in today's episode at the end of the day with Ray, I brought up the conversation. Do we really need tech data 5 years from now? Could Amazon do their job?
Right.
That's, think about that. It's a little scary to think about, but in all reality, they're the largest provider of products worldwide. They understand logistics better than anybody in the world. Why can't they deliver tech equipment?
Right.
Because they never wanted to?
Yeah, because they haven't focused on that space yet. But
they don't want to. They didn't want to deliver A3 machines and sorters and sorter brackets and all that crap. I mean, who the hell would want to do that? But when all of those customers, or a big giant majority of them, only need a little tiny machine, well, they could do that real well. They can market. I mean, they're already talking to the end users. You got HP out there telling their dealers, and they're doing it, this Amplify agreement, which is just insane. give us all the information about your customers and we'll give you better pricing. So one day when we decide we don't need you anymore, you gave us all the information. And, and what's amazing to me is dealers are buying into this nonsense.
Right.
And they're, we can save some money and we gotta sign the contract so that we can compete locally with another HP provider who signed the contract. Well, in all reality, let HP take the data from your competitor and go find another, OEM. So it'll be interesting.
Before we get to the end here, can you talk a little bit about at the end of the day with Ray? Kind of give people a plug on the podcast you do, and and maybe a couple of the other things you do too. But I say I enjoy watching End of the Day with Ray. I bump in there all the time, and you have some interesting guests. You even have some, we've had Marco on there a few times, some regional guys going on. But
Marco's intrigued me. They probably do IT better than all the people in our space in the U.S. market. I mean, they have figured it out. They have a big business. Do they do everything perfect? Probably not, but who does? But if you look at a percentage of their revenue overall and the size that they are, I did a video on them the other day talking about who might buy them. But, the End of the Day with Ray is it's just a video I started doing here in the studio right now. I just have the camera facing my TV. But all I do, I make it simple. I use my iPhone, I put it on a tripod, and I record me talking to whoever's on there, or I record me talking with showing a slide. I try to go and talk about things that nobody else will talk about. And in our industry, probably like the tech industry, there's a lot of stuff that nobody will talk about.
Right.
I do have a YouTube channel, and I patiently just put all these videos on YouTube, even though everybody told me not to do that. Just show them raw on LinkedIn, because then people don't have to go to YouTube. But over the last, I think I have over 550 videos on YouTube. So over the last couple of years, I've built a massive YouTube channel and have never really promoted that. But in order to get compensated by YouTube, you have to have 4,000 hours watched a year, and that year moves every day, so 12-month calendar. And you have to have 1,000 subscribers. And so I really wanted my subscribers to come naturally. I didn't want to spy them. There's people that call me up all the time. Oh, Ray, you got a great channel, but you don't have enough subscribers. We can sell, we'll sell you some. But I wanted to not do that because I was more focused on having the reactions on YouTube be 35 to 50% of the subscriber number. So my videos on YouTube, they'll show maybe 200 views, 300 views, sometimes 5 or 6 if it's really controversial. If I'm talking about an OEM or something, it might climb up there. But, I didn't want to have 5,000 subscribers that I bought and then only get 35 or 40 views or something. But now that I'm getting closer to the monetization of YouTube, I'll start promoting that a little bit more. But, we try to make Do we need to pay a tax? We pay a tax to put gas in our car for what? For a of infrastructure to get us from point A to point B. But we're not willing to invest in our own security is a problem. And
it's interesting. As a person who sells the security stuff, I do see that where like it doesn't seem to matter until it matters, and then it really matters. And like you said, people get kind of weird about that spend, where there are ways they can protect themselves, but they choose not to until they aren't able to get to their data. Then it's like, freak out.
Well, I did an episode with my buddy Milton where I interviewed him as the CEO of ransomware. I don't know if you all saw that, but it was kind of a spoof. And the point was I went to the ransomware stockholders meeting, and then Milton was the president. He was sharing how successful they are and how their revenues are growing and their per transactions are growing. And, thankfully they built the help desk and they're getting people to be able to pay them with, Bitcoin quicker and all this shit. But it's more of an awareness to say, holy crap, this is so real. But it just amazes me today that, corporations just wait. They just, oh, well, it's not about us. And all it is, it's one email to one person that works for you that could destroy your company.
Yeah.
90%, you probably know the number better than I do, but it's like 80 to 90% of all problems are caused because the company did something wrong. Not maliciously, they just didn't know any better.
Yeah, people are the weak link,
So I'm just thinking to myself, how in the world, there has to be a way to do this. We just haven't put enough emphasis on it. I think we put all the emphasis on keeping people from getting in when we knew that was impossible. It's not a safe. We can make a better safe, and the combination, the only way to get in is use a bunch of dynamite, so we eliminate all the people that are going to break into the safe. That's an easy way to do it. But we can't treat cybersecurity that way. We have to assume they're already there.
Right.
So, if we assume they're already there, then how do we build a defense to stop them once they're there?
That's one of the things. So I do a radio show, and that's one of the things that we talk about is having an effective recovery position, because motivated intruder is going to get in, right? I mean, you're going to stop them for a while, but if they're motivated, they're going to find a way in. The secret is, how do you recover from that? How do you quickly recover from that?
Well, they were in so.
Well, it's two things. It's how do you recover from it, but how do you detect it? I mean,
detection and recovery.
There's stats. It's dropping. The good news is, but I mean, it takes months. Literally, I mean, look at SolarWinds. They were hacked 7-8 months before they even realized it.
Well, they were the hackers. That's what I'm saying. They were already in there doing all their work before SolarWinds ever even figured it out. And then they figured out how to put, that was an amazing, I think Milton described that as the most revenue per letter of code in the world. Because that was a very small code that did that. And, if you think about what that caused, but here we are still, what has it changed? It hasn't changed shit. And no one's even talking about it because they're afraid of what? Tomo Bravo and a bunch of private equity guys. I mean, I don't get it at all. That video I did was probably one of the least publicly liked videos. I think I had like 15 reactions on LinkedIn, but I had 49 emails.
My opinion would be that we do find things, we do fix them, but these guys are just ahead of the curve. No matter what is done to prevent them from coming in at some point, they will figure out how to get around it. And there's always, when you're talking software and you're especially talking people, like you said, somebody's going to click on that link or open that attachment, and software is never going to be perfect. And there lies your problem.
Well, we just have to figure out if it's education, then it just has to be education. And if the education has to be brutal with consequences to employees, then that's what it has to be. I mean, I think about a pilot. You don't just show up and say, I want to be a pilot. No, you got to get trained. You can't crash a plane. You've got all these people that you're responsible for. So what do you have to do? You have to take it serious. And so, if we don't start taking it serious, then we're never going to fix the problem. And one of the things that's even more scary is, so if you look at the EU, where they've actually put a lot of laws in place, well, now that's even motivating the hackers even more, because they know they're going to get paid, because the penalties to be hacked are worse than the ransom. So they're looking at the ransom saying, well, hell, if this company's going to get this fine, let's just make the ransom just a little bit less and they'll just pay us. And they don't want the government to find out. They don't want the EU to find out. And so
the way around that is taking the incentive out of the hacking. And how do you do that? You're going to have to get to these bad people. You're going to have to prosecute them. You're going to have to make the pain more on their side than our side.
Well, it's so funny that you could go into a store with a gun and point it at someone and steal $100 from them and go to jail. But that same company, someone could go in there and steal and put them out of business and nothing happens. Or if they do get caught, it's some kind of a white collar thing. And so, I mean, this is, to me, cybersecurity is a war. It is a war. And, it's probably we thought the Cold War was bad, but this is really a problem.
Oh, and the challenge about that is that it is a war, like you said, but people aren't thinking about it that way, right? It's a whole different way of they just don't think about it that way, right?
Well, without, think about this, and this, this is nutty when you think about it. Did you ever sit through one of the Senate hearings on anything to do with technology? These people
No, but painful, I would imagine.
They're painful. They're asking Facebook what he does.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, so you have the governance body, if you will, that refuses to accept the new world we live in.
Yeah.
And trying to manage this cyber war like they managed the Cold War or something. So, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Or we bring in, really smart, people that could change the game, but the infrastructure that it will take to change that game is so untangible to all these all these senators and people that govern the country, they can't comprehend it.
Right.
I mean, I think, and I did it on purpose because I want to be able to show this tape in the future, but who in the world, I've never heard anybody tell the whole world they should pay a tax to use technology and that money would go to fight cybersecurity. But in all reality, why aren't we talking about that? Whether it's good or bad, have the damn debate. Whether, why are we allowing private equity to use our biggest companies that could help solve this problem as slot machines? And so, there's a lot of things that have to change in the space. It's not just about the users, but how do we set a tone, kind of like what Kenneth was saying, how do we set a tone to make people pay attention to this?
Right.
Where there is real consequences, because the consequences to the business, I mean, what owner would buy the biggest, safe that he could possibly get, because his whole business was built on cash. So he has all this money that he puts in the safe every night and just leaves it open. So you all later going home and doesn't bother locking.
Right.
I mean, it's just incomprehensible. What owner would give the receptionist that just started with them 2 days ago the keys to the office and say, I need you to lock everything up and here's the combination of the safe? But yet we do that every single day. We walk out of our office and we just leave it wide open.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that it kind of even goes back to what you're talking about when you talk about the change in the print space. All too often, we don't contemplate what it means to have technology straight through every part of our business. We don't think about what that means. We don't contemplate that. And, when I'm working with businesses, part of what I say is I don't need veto power, but I should be part of these conversations, because technology is in every single aspect of your business, and they don't think about it like that. But it is the brave new world in that regard, and that thinking does need to change.
Well, technology, the thing about, they used to talk about work-life balance, which I thought was just a crazy thing. I always hated that, because it's really about an integration. So today our lives and the technologies we use are integrating rapidly with the technologies we use in the office. And years ago, you had to go to the office to use technologies. You couldn't have an IBM computer in your house. It took up a whole office in your building. And so in order to get the work done, we all had to go and use the technology. Well, today, the technology we use in our personal lives, most of the time, is more sophisticated than the technology we're using in our business. And so, but as technology starts to integrate, how is that going to affect cybercrime? Refrigerators that we now put in our break rooms in the office and the same refrigerator we have in our house are all on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's
don't get Kenneth started on IoT.
No, there you go. Are we getting some questions, it seems, or anybody want to ask any questions?
I'm just reading this, and I think it's more of a statement, yeah, about governments and that stuff. Yeah, no, this has been a very interesting discussion. I mean, I think we're almost up against it now. I don't know that we're going to even have for the NetVPro after hours, huh, Paul?
Yeah, we have to have James turn off the recording now so we can have, but I think we've spoken freely already. So.